about the English language per se. If the perfect Word of God is our English translation, then what are what are they supposed to use who do not speak English?
Okay, that question is usually asked in this manner. If there's a perfect English Bible, there's got to be a perfect German Bible. Now, there was somebody that thought that. Perfect Italian Bible, perfect French Bible. We don't even want them to have one. Perfect Japanese Bible, perfect. You understand? And here's what I explain, if I can. All right, God is. We are creatures of habit, and God is consistent. Did we come from monkeys? No. But they have a similar framework. He used that framework many times. And then if you bend it over and put the front feet on the ground, you got horses, dogs, everything else. Okay? God, when he inspired the Old Testament, he inspired it in one language, Hebrew. Now, other than Daniel chapter 2, verse 24 to about 7, verse 28, which is in Chaldee, but basically the Old Testament is in Hebrew. Then when somebody says, well, if they don't speak English, where do they get a Bible? Where did everybody that didn't speak Hebrew get a Bible? God didn't feel obligated to the whole world to give them the perfect Word of God. Nobody told them, if you want access to the perfect Bible, learn Hebrew. But keep this in mind also. They are his chosen people, the Jews, are they not? But this wasn't like a plum, the Bible. It wasn't like a plum. It wasn't like a trophy. He also told them to go. Yeah, you know, if you thought about this, look at Matthew chapter 23. The Jews were similar to this church in one respect. They had a mission program. The Jews believed in missions. He's upbraiding the Pharisees, and usually in verse 15, we only read part of this verse because we're always looking at the downside of the Pharisees. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you can pass sea and land to make one proselyte. And then we continue over the second half of the verse and jump on them. But didn't he just, guys, isn't that map? Don't you have down your hall pictures of people who do what? Can pass sea and land to make one convert. We even have evidence of the success of their mission program in Acts chapter 8, where a guy from Ethiopia, not exactly a Jewish country, was in Jerusalem worshiping because he'd been converted. So he didn't just give them the Bible, but he said, go to the world, make them all Jews. When he came to the New Testament, he put it in Greek. All right, think about this. That's the dog's language. He didn't even put the New Testament in the language of his chosen people, the Jews. But were they not also given a mandate to take the gospel? So when he put them together, Now, I'm going to tell you what I think, which you can throw out, doesn't bother me at all. I think the languages were going to be Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Latin was the language of the Roman Empire. The three charges against the three descriptions on the cross were in what three languages? Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. You say, well, what happened to Latin? The Roman Catholic Church happened to Latin. And when they take a hold of something, that usually ruins it. And so God put the Bible in English. Now, it's not a trophy. It's not, you hear these people, oh, you people that speak English, you think you're so special. No, along with it came a mandate to take the gospel around the world. And we have done it. I'll bet you 95%, and that's maybe a lowball figure, 95% of world missionaries speak English, or they're from English-speaking countries. I was in the Philippines. Yeah, I was in the Philippines, and I met a man from South Korea who was a missionary to the Philippines. Well, see, right there. He didn't speak Tagalog, and they didn't speak Hangul, Korean. The reason the guy from South Korea could minister to the Filipinos, they both spoke English. So when he did it the first time, he didn't feel obligated to anybody else. He said, if you want access to my word, read Hebrew or learn Hebrew. I imagine the Arabs like that. When he put the New Testament down, he didn't put it in Hebrew. He told his own chosen people, you want access to my perfect book? Learn Greek. So the first two times he did it in one language and did not feel. I always say this. Don't obligate God to something he didn't say. And he never said, I'm giving it to you in every word, every language. So it's not inconsistent, since he did it twice already, that when he put it in one language, he told the whole world, get that language. So, help you?
Yes. A follow-up to that, are there people who do not use English as their primary language, as their first language?
Tons of them.
That believe, yes. Amen.
In this country.
Yes, amen. Who believe that the King James Bible is God's perfect word?
I can't speak for people. But yes, in fact, in 1999, it was in Seoul, South Korea. They had just translated not the TR, but the King James into Hangul. And in many of those Asian countries, they're very intellectual. These guys were very sharp, very intellectual. And here is this, now if you worked at translating something like that into your language, I mean, you would have some kind of like pride in it, wouldn't you? And here's what he said. He took my King James Bible out of my hand, and he held his fresh off the press Hangul copy of the King James, and he said, this, what he just got done working on, is not the perfect word of God. This is. And believe it or not, I get requests all the time to translate my understandable history into Spanish, which really makes me scratch my head. I mean, In fact, can I give you a sidebar? Have you ever heard anybody, people say, well, what about the Spanish? I was at a church some time ago, and I taught the Agape Phileo. And the pastor's a King James guy, and he came to the pulpit and went, I never heard anything like that in my life. So every morning I met him in his office. The next morning when I met in his office, he had his desk, he had a chair backed up to it, 9 chairs for his staff. They were all there in a semicircle. He sat me down, introduced me to his staff, and walked out. And for 2.5 hours, I fielded questions because none of them believed the book. And my wife said, well, how was it? I said, I don't mean this wrong, guys, no pride, batting practice. But on the far right was the guy with his Spanish ministry, and I knew what was coming. Because they like go, you gringos, you're racist. So I wait, he says, what about the Spanish? I said, you ever read Romans chapter 15, verse 24 and 15, 28? Oh yeah? I said, that's where Paul says, I'm going to come by you into Spain. Spain existed in Paul's time, correct? What language do you figure they spoke? Probably Spanish. I said, buddy, if God wanted to put the Bible in Spanish, he had a chance. He rejected it 2,000 years ago. And think about this. And I just, I get tired of their ego. So I said, and think about this. When he refused Spanish, when he rejected Spanish, English doesn't even exist. He didn't say, I chose this instead of yours. He says, I just don't want yours. But here's the reason. Here's the reason. These countries here are the ones that are premier of taking the gospel around the world. Somebody write this down or remember it. There's a book out there about that big it was written in 1945 called They Found the Church There. And it was a testimony of naval aviators and sailors during World War II who had washed up on a beach somewhere in some South Seas island, woke up with a black guy with an afro and a bone in his nose, a machete in his hand, and when they woke up, they thought, uh-oh, and he said, come on, I'll take you to the missionary. He said, one guy said they had 7 of us, and these 2 guys, they were taking us in a swamp, and we knew we were in trouble. We knew we were at their mercy. And he said, and then they started whistling Onward Christian Soldiers because English-speaking people. So this is not a badge, people. This is not a plum. This is not a reward for us. This doesn't make you better than anybody else. With this comes the mandate to take the gospel, and it's always been that way.
Can I ask a follow-up question? I know some folks have asked this of me. So in a practical sense, I believe I know what your answer is, but I'm going to ask it from that vantage point. Are you saying then that when we go to Cambodia, when we go to Spain or Mexico, or we go to any other country that does not speak English as its primary language, we need to teach them English so they can have a Bible?
The gospel, it depends. The gospel can be understood in just about any language, and that is the first thing you want to do, correct? Get them saved. People say, well, then you got to learn English. Well, if they want access to the perfect Bible, they need to learn English. Just like if they wanted access to the perfect Bible, they needed to learn Greek. Just like if they wanted access to the perfect Bible, they needed to learn Hebrew. This is not a Ruckmanite being exclusive. This is what God did 3 times. But I have no problem. I mean, I wouldn't go in there and rip on them about, in many of those countries, they have an NIV in their language. And if it's the only Bible, I just would stay away from the passages. I knew a missionary to Mexico, and he said there were about 35 places where the Spanish Bible that I used had mistakes, and he said I'd correct it with the King James. But he preached out of that Bible. So, I'm not a snob about that or exclusive. I'm not going to go, well, we have a perfect Bible and you don't. But that's what God did 3 times. Another follow-up?
Yes. Well, I was thinking about what you said, and it is interesting, just as a personal thought, that the people who would accuse a King James Bible believer of being exclusive, many of them tell us we don't have the perfect Bible in English. We have to go back and try to find it in the Greek. So it's a similar argument anyhow.
Yeah.
But I do have a question here, and if you can help me figure it out, that would be very helpful.
I have the gift of interpretation.
How the question is even worded, I'm not sure. But not to denigrate who asked it, but I don't quite understand it. Does it not seem that most KJB advocates tend to fall in one people group and generally be one primary language speakers?
Let me ask you a question. Does that guy know all King James Bible believers to make that statement authoritatively? See, that's the thing, guys. If you let them be the cop and you accept something, how does that guy know? He doesn't know. But I'll give you this. I'll tell you what, have you ever heard, well, the King James issue wasn't even around before 1950. And I thought about that, and personally, I figured this. I figured it probably started around 1881, right after the RV. That's what I thought. I told you, I read all the time, guys. I'm always in stuff, and it's ancient stuff, and it's old British writers who I am so glad they're dead. So I'd hunt them down. And I was reading a book in 1824. And the guy's, believe it or not, he's an independent Baptist preacher writing a book against a coming Baptist translation that was going to put the word immerse instead of baptize. And he said, then we're going to be like Jehovah's Witnesses. We have to have a Bible of our own. And he made this statement in 1824. He said, now, I don't believe our English Bible is absolutely perfect like some of my friends do. So there were Ruckmanites in 1824. I don't know. So I don't know where some of that stuff got started, but that's documentation for that statement. But, that's it. See, that's that guilt trip. Well, you English speakers, you think because you got the Bible. Whoa, those are the guys that took the gospel. God could have gone 3 directions from Jerusalem, and he didn't go Africa, and he didn't go Asia. He went to Europe, and those guys got that book and took it around the world. So, that he once put us on the defensive, like, what he ought to do is say, God, who do you think you are, gone to Europe? That's what he ought to say. And I don't answer for God, but I hope that guy's saved, because I wouldn't be there when God answers that question for him. Anything else?
No, go back to Brother Harold.